Oh, okay.
Yeah, so,
Okay.
uh,
Yeah. Yeah.
so
But
and
should I leave my camera on or not?
yeah, you should leave a
Okay.
camera.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. And so, can you tell us about your Kakadia sandbox and where you got the inspiration for this initiative?
Hmm. Now, this again, I've talked about, my sort of good fortune of having so many Bitsyans play instrumental role in my journey at various stages, but even philanthropy. So, my co-founder, Faninder Sama, who many of you probably know about, founder of Redbus, he and I started this. This is our 10th year, and also, there's another Bitsyan, Shravya Nalla, who sort of has been instrumental part of it, pretty much like an early sort of part of the founding team. She's also Bitsian, and so the idea behind Kakatiya Science. So this is back in 2010. That is when Hitachi bought my company, Sierra Atlantic, and then. So I've always wanted to do something, more in India that can have a meaningful impact. But also I felt like, I mean, there are obviously a lot of challenges, which also means that many more opportunities, and both in urban and rural India. But the problems of urban India are more visible to, people like us who have the knowledge or resources. But rural India, in general, there's a huge gap. And also fundamentally, I always believe that unless we create more economic opportunities in rural India, we cannot get to be an economic superpower. When I say we, I'm talking about India. Um, and so that's kind of the central element. So everything we do in Kakatiya Sandbox is about improving income opportunities, improving income levels in rural India. So we pick a closing geography, roughly about 10 million population. So this is all in North Telangana. So I come from this town, Nizamabad, which shares a border with Nanded in Karnataka and Bidar in Nanded in Maharashtra and Bidar in Karnataka. And it's about 3 hours north of Hyderabad on the way to Nagpur. So that's the hub of it. But the work actually happens in a lot of, districts and villages across North Telangana. And in fact, parts of it now, even in Nanded, Maharashtra also, we're doing that work. So at a high level, there are sort of three main constructs. One, it is a bottom-up form of socio-economic development, meaning unless the local people are an active part of the solution, these are not sustainable. And so a lot of my work goes into engaging, people in the community locally. And of course, we also have 300 employees in Kakatiya Sandbox today, mostly in the different villages across the state, across the region where we operate. And that's one bottom-up form of economic development. Second is taking an entrepreneurial mindset to addressing social challenges, which is back to what we were talking about earlier, one of your earlier questions on how does sort of the business world, apply to philanthropy, right? So there's quite a bit of rigor into, making sure that we are actually making the impact and, all of that, and measuring that at various stages. And the third is scale. Again, in a country of over a billion people, there are a lot of people doing good, wonderful work in some villages here and there, and so that's great. The country can use that, but unless you touch a large population, you can't a meaningful difference. You can't make a meaningful difference, right? So here, yeah, we started roughly. The idea being, yeah, this is about 10 million people in Kakatiya Sandbox. Today, it's probably our impact region is more like 12 to maybe 14 million. And but this is all inspired by wonderful work that Deshpande, very well-known tech entrepreneur out of Boston, he and his wife Jayashree have been doing in Hubli. That has been running for about 15 years. So when I looked at different things that I could do, I met Desh, visited Hubli, very inspired by that. And then Funny and I, we kind of knew each other well, and we teamed up, and so that's how it began. Yeah.
Okay, sir. And so how do you prioritize your commitments and manage your time effectively as an entrepreneur, board member, and a mentor?
Yeah. So I think, see, when you really love what you're doing, generally, none of this will feel like work. You know, and today, of course, I'm at a place, fortunately, where I'm not having to worry about sort of, earning for my to support my family and all that. So my and the priorities kind of keep shifting, right, from time to time. When I was running a company, clearly there was only focus by and large, outside of your family, of course, always. And today, I would say the sandbox work is clearly top of mind for me. I spend most of my waking hours thinking about that or talking to people. Uh, you know, about that, my team, and so and then the startups where I already have a commitment and where I serve on the board, that's always a commitment that I made. And third is people that reach out to me for various things, and just and in particular Bitsians, over the years I've been quite fond of those sort of interactions. But sometimes, of course, it's not as practical just to, given the amount of time that we have. But as I'm getting older, I'm also paying more attention to sort of health, just try and, stay healthy physically, because I think that's important just to be able to, do any of these things. And Unfortunately, in California where I live, there are a lot of nice outdoors, and so that's worked out well. But here again, ask me, I would say it comes down to again finding the right people, right? So if you have the right leadership in any of these companies that I'm supporting, or certainly in my sandbox and all of that, then to a large extent, my sort of uh, my work, is not that important as long as they can find the right person and support him or her with the resources that they need, because they determine sort of the outcome of each of these initiatives far more than anything I can do. Yeah. So,
That's true, sir. So, shall we move on to audience questions now?
oh, absolutely. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, okay, sir. Anyone who has questions can raise their hand. Yeah, Arnav, you can go ahead.
So you mentioned that uh, taking the execution part of the corporate side and taking the passion for philanthropy is the key to like generating a good corporate social responsibility program. So, what advice do you give to young entrepreneurs and young startups in their early stages? Like, do they need to focus on their CSR part more, or should they wait to develop the business and then go for the CSR part? Like, how do you balance the profitability and the social responsibility part?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I would say, when you're a founder, well, that's Arnav, right? Okay. Yeah. Yeah, I think it'll be good just if each of you who ask a question, just introduce yourself just a little bit, so I have some context for, what you're doing.
Yes,
Yeah.
so I'm Arnav. I'm in Triple E 22 batch,
Oh,
second
nice.
year right now.
Okay, great, great. Arnav, good question. Just keep in mind when you're a startup and you're trying to build that, you already are doing something that's very socially responsible. Hopefully, if you succeed big, you're going to create a lot of jobs and wealth in the community. I would say, don't get too worried about, oh, what am I doing the right thing for the sort of the world, beyond just trying to build my startup, right? Now, the culture with which you build the company, certainly there could be a lot of things that you do, right? And but I would say, your focus should be singular. Focus should be just making all your stakeholders successful. The employees who are counting on you, the investors who may have put in money, and and the co-founders that you brought along on the ride, and all of that, and your customers, obviously, right? When you do that and do that right and do it at scale, that's going to create plenty of opportunities, on the philanthropic side. In many ways, you're creating, employment, and hopefully you're inspiring a lot of other people to go, create more jobs, more startups, or more jobs, and all of that, right? There comes a, and this is not to say just ignore the importance of sort of a good living and all of that, but I don't think you need to sort of encumber yourself with that, at this stage. Yeah.
So I guess having the good core values within the company will automatically help us balance profitability and the social responsibility.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, you take care of your employees properly, and you sort of open, sincere, and again, they don't expect any miracles from leaders. People don't expect that, but they expect you to be transparent and sort of the ethics and the values with which you build the organization. I think that's far more important. With the compassion or whatever. But yeah, saying okay, I should allocate this many hours for doing something outside. I mean, if it happens, well and good. Once you get to a certain scale, then yeah, then maybe some things you make it easier for employees who want to, make them available for something or whatever. But I don't think you need to sort of really get distracted by that. It's hard enough to build a startup and to have the kind of, commercial success that you need to. The odds are heavily, against you, right? Very few that sort of get to that stage of building a successful company. Yeah, but I
Sir,
think
another question I had about this only, like, how have you seen the social responsibility part evolve from like, let's take an example of a small startup that you might have mentored to a big conglomerate like Hitachi. So what differences have you observed in how they handle their CSR?
yeah. So again, I think uh, yeah, I think in some ways, that's also driven by just what sort of, depending on what markets you operate in, and if in terms of as the companies transition, I'm just thinking loud if there's anything distinct that I've seen with these companies. I mean, all of them, try to make. I think it comes from the leader in some ways, to a large extent, the values with which you sort of run the organization, because people are the same whether they're inside, company premises or when they go home, right? And so if you as a leader, do have some particular uh, interest in doing things more in the community, then it's likely somebody else will sort of pick up on it, or you might get some amazing ideas from people within the organization that you might like. So when you start talking about your culture and saying, hey, these are the values that are important, I think naturally you will start attracting those kind of people, and and they will come up with ideas, and then it's a question of whether and how much time and in what ways can you support. But I would say it's not so much about, are they very different from the early stages to later? Maybe marginally, but it all comes down to, again, the leader and the values, I would say. I don't think those things fundamentally change. Obviously, you'll have more resources when you're a much larger company like Hitachi, whether it's financial or, um, or people to work with. And there are more people that sort of listen to you. But yeah, yeah. But till you succeed, right? It's what happens is once you start succeeding, and once you get to a certain scale, the one big difference, as I think more about it, is you have the credibility now. People, just because I built a successful companies here at Atlantic, people automatically assume that I'm smarter than I really am, right? That's true. So in fact, I tell a lot of founders, that's why that I work with, hey, where I mentor and all of that. One of the things you actually got me thinking more on this. One of the things I tell them is, 1% of your wealth, whenever you get to that big exit, right, should go to some philanthropic thing. Now, I have plenty of ideas on what those are. But one of the reasons I do that is obviously that capital helps if he or she succeeds and becomes super wealthy someday. But also now they have a lot of credibility. They become role models in the community, right? So people are likely to emulate, and so I think that's where the power is as you scale and as you succeed. Yeah. Hopefully that
Thank you, sir.
answers your question, Anna. Yeah,
Yes, sir.
yeah,
That's
yeah,
perfect answer. Thank you, sir.
yeah. Great.
Eklavya, you may go next.
Hello, sir. Am I audible?
Yes.
Yeah, sir. So my question was, So, as far as you've interacted with students, what is like the biggest misconception that you see in them, like that hampers their progress and growth? One thing that students think is true, but they should be aware of it because it hampers them going ahead.
I'm sorry, I think you kind of faded in between. You said, what is the biggest thing that you've done? What hampers? Asmi,
Uh,
did you pick up? Go ahead, yeah.
so, sir, basically, I'm trying to ask you, what is like the one thing you see in students of our age that you think they should be careful of so that it does not hamper them in the future?
Wow, okay. Well, one is, I think, you know, this is a beautiful thing about bits, right? It gives you I mentioned that earlier. This entire class attendance being optional, other things, it allows you to experiment and kind of, you know, uh, really discover yourself. Almost all the Bitcoin founders that I've invested in, where I've had very successful outcomes, right? Or the ones that the one that I did make an investment offer, but at the time, some of the VC came in, that was postman. Almost all of them were doing something else outside of the classroom on campus. Gray Orange very early on. In fact, that's how I came to meet them. They were building these robots and out there competing. And Pixel, a more recent one that you all know, Aves Ahmed. I mean, he was in that Elon Musk Hyperloop competition. So I would say it's more of what you do. So don't waste the opportunity, to sort of explore things outside of just the classroom stuff, right? And it doesn't have to be building planning your next startup or building some prototype or something. It could even be just, you know get involved in drama club or something. That's what interests you, but just things, I think, that broaden the horizons for you. I would say that's very important. Yeah.
Right, sir. And I had another question, if I may go ahead.
I'll let Asmi sort of manage that. Asmi, you decide whether you want to.
Let's do one question at a time. We can come back to him later on. Sanovar, you may go next.
Good evening, sir. I am Sanovar Singh and I'm majoring in economics and computer science. So, you mentioned how you look for leadership qualities in the people that you mentor. So, do you think that leadership is a quality one is born with, or is leadership an acquired talent? And if it is an acquired talent, like how can I make sure what are the attributes of a true leader and how can I acquire leadership qualities?
Yeah, yeah. No, I was saying, leadership, it comes down to leadership, whether it is for profit or not for profit. And specifically for the entrepreneurs, I think that was the question from Asmi. I was saying these are some of the traits that I look for. One is, being able to persuade and, sell. Essentially, you're a, dream merchant, right? You're out there, you're always selling dreams. And so now, whether that's, I think these are all, qualities that you acquire over time. I don't think any of these are sort of things that you're born with. And I, I'm also a big believer in this sort of power of relatable role models. Um, for my own journey, when I was starting Sierra Atlantic, back in 1993, there are very few Indian American entrepreneurs, right? That were out there in the industry, in Silicon Valley or even in US more broadly. But the few that I saw, Kanwal Rekhi, who turned out to be a fantastic mentor for me, people like Suhas Patil, Desh Pandey. When I saw them, I said, "Hey, these guys can do. Why not me?" Right? So I think that is immensely valuable. To some extent, I think the same thing is happening in the BITS community. Once you saw, few of these entrepreneurs like Funny and Samay and others, hopefully others before that, from my generation who have done, I mean, your generation has done a lot more than anything that we could do in our times. And so I think those things matter a lot. So it's absolutely an acquired quality. And also, these things, you continue to hone your skill. It's not like a static thing, right? As you get into the industry and you work with more people, and you start appreciating, understanding how important, everyone talks about team and all of that, But till you're out there, starting to build a company or other things, and especially, needing to scale, you don't quite get the understanding of, how important that is. And, so yeah, I think it comes down to that, your ability to make others around you successful. So if you can do that, then you become immensely successful, right? So I think the more you have that sort of a attitude towards, things that you do, whether it's for profit or not for profit, I think it makes a lot of difference. Yeah,
Yeah, thank you, sir.
sure.
Yash, you may go next.
Yeah, so good evening, sir. I'm a third year student. I'm studying computer science, and I had a question regarding uh, the point you said on masters. So at that time, you said it was a trend to go to the US, right? Yeah, it was a trend, I guess. Like everyone used to go to the US for their masters, then just continue to work there. But now that's kind of changing. I mean, people who go to do their masters in the US now are going particularly because they want to do research or they want to do something deeper in that field, right? And more from an academic perspective, and not just going to the US for the sake of going to the US. So, what do you think a master's from the US added to you? Would you still recommend it to someone in this generation? And also considering that technologies like AI, ML, these are the new big things in computer science. At least from my perspective, right now, that it's not something I think anyone in bits really understands. And I do really believe that you need a higher some higher form of education to understand these things truly. Do you think a master's is valuable? Like, what's your take on that?
Well, for one, see, BITS at that time, I don't know how many people here even know about it, but which was the first college in India, even ahead of IITs, to have a class on microprocess. There was a professor by name Dr. A.P. Mathur who wrote a book that I was told later was also used in IITs and all that, on microprocess, right? And the practice school, my practice school was. Working with at that time the Intel processor 8085. I was at CSIO Chandigarh, and the reason why I'm mentioning all of this is, so once you completed the bachelor's degree, there's almost no place within India, even if I wanted to, right, to do a master's in computer science that I could have gone to, that had any sort of infrastructure. Now that's vastly different today. Clearly, there are a lot more choices. And frankly, platforms like this, what we got, this Bits Embryo, and many other things. Just the technology. Sitting in Pilani, you have access to a lot of the information that somebody in Silicon Valley might. So I don't think the gap is as significant. Now, certainly, I think. Even within US, when you talk about AI, ML, and all of these, there's a huge gap. So just don't be misled by thinking, oh, there's not much here, it's in US. Heck no. I think there's a, even within US, in fact, there's a company that, I'm on the board, I funded, it's called SciSpace, which is on, accelerating sort of scientific research, right? And so it's all built on Gen AI. And the founder was here in Bangalore, the two founders, the CEO. And then he moved to Munich for a while because of some personal things. And then he moved to the Bay Area saying, that's the place to build the Gen AI company. And he's getting amazing user adoption. And then even within Bay Area, he was in Sunnyvale, South Bay. And then he said, well, everything is happening in San Francisco. That's only 40 miles north. But he just then decided to move to San Francisco. And he says it's a world of difference between, just the amount of activity in Gen AI right now. That seems to be kind of the locus for that, right? So now, so when you think about a master's and all of that, I'm sure, the colleges there are, more programs. But I do think a lot of it also comes down to, again, it depends on your interest. If you want to do deep research and all of that, no question about it. There are more research universities and choices in general in the US. But if you're thinking about something that also, involves connecting with the industry and all, I would say just making a few trips there and interacting with people there. However, I mean, that's what Aves did. When Aves, Pixel that I'm assuming many of you know about, he actually came to the BitSync. He attended BitSync, which is an annual event in Silicon Valley. That's where I met him first time, and while he was still in college, right? And so I think that mattered a lot to him, just in expanding sort of his own horizons, but also connecting up with people that he probably could not have otherwise as easily, right? So there may be other ways to sort of achieve some of the things that you're talking about, is all I'm saying. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you.
Sure.
Vivek, you may go next.
Hello, sir. Am I audible?
Yes.
Sir, my question was, how does a new person uh, get to know about how do I learn? What do I learn if I want to start a startup? What do I learn, and how? What books do I read, and what should I learn? Like, should I learn how to code? Should I learn what the stock markets are? Like, how do I start basically? How did you start?
Well, I think, first of all, I mean, you need to decide whether that's the right thing for you or not. I mean, I think you're already learning enough. Just by being at BITS, you're lucky that you are in the perfect environment. I think BITS is a fountainhead for entrepreneurship now in India. I think we really have a disproportionate share of high quality founders coming out of Pilani, and you also have almost an unfair advantage if you ever get to the point of seeking capital, right? If it's a Bitsian founder, seems like in India at least, and even in US now, increasingly people recognize, they have, there is a certain, you know, I think the educational background in BITS in many ways is preparing you already well. So I would say, don't worry about whether I do read this book or that book. I mean, just get involved, like in NVC, or like, showing up on a forum like this, Embryo, and because I assume these are all optional, right? And yeah, and then talk to people who have done that, and then figure out maybe this is not even the right time. You don't have to do a startup out of college. I mean, very few of them succeed. Uh, the ones that have succeeded, I mean, these are more of exceptions. If I recall, Abhinav, I think he was doing the BITS 360 project in a while on campus in Goa. In fact, he tried to sell that, I think, as a business, and that never took off. And then through that, he discovered, okay, there is this thing in APIs that seems to be unsolved. And then, that's how we started Postman. And but because of the BITS 360, I'm sure there are a bunch of things that he learned about himself and the opportunities outside, right? And Gray Orange, yeah, when they built the acute first robot, I mean, it has nothing to do with what this company is doing. And when I wrote, kind of pretty much the first check there, I mean, I had no idea what they're going to do in robotics. I just thought these are smart founders, and I like them enough. I've seen them from close quarters that they'll figure it out. And the company, of course, is evolved to become something very different. So it's, I think, your ability to learn than just what exactly you learn that becomes important. And and just connecting up with this, where the alumni community hopefully can be a big help also. But don't be in a rush to start a company just straight out of college. Once you take a job, that's why when I said why you, majority of the founders that have built big great companies are people who have actually come from some company. They have worked at some other company before, and then they observed some problems, and then that's how they came out. And so yeah, I would say it's more about your ability to learn than what exactly you learn. Yeah, that matters.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Sure.
Aryan, you may go next.
Yeah. Yeah. Hello, sir. I'm Aryan and I'm pursuing Triple E with physics. So I'm currently doing my PS at American Express. So my question would be like, I'd like to know your opinion on maybe some sort of prediction of how a society will be framed in the next 50 years. Maybe you can give an idea of what industries or sectors you believe will be thriving, or maybe the biggest game changers like Gen AI or blockchain, and how they will affect our society as a whole. Maybe the job scenario and how the companies will be structured. That sort of an idea you could give,
Mm.
and
Yeah,
maybe some sort of bold predictions from your side.
yeah. Well, one thing I get to sort of, make my own assessments of what the future might look like by, listening and talking to young people like you guys, right? And especially the entrepreneurs that are kind of changing the world in many ways. One thing absolutely I do believe and, uh, hope is, I think India's time has come. There's no question about it. I mean, you you see a lot of this, and I think, um, a- a- and I hope we can find ways to sort of create more economic opportunities beyond the metros. And that's the part I'm unsure about how quickly that can happen. I think you said next 50 years. So I sure hope there's going to be a big change. Um, in the sort of India that's beyond the metros, right? Because 70% of India still lives there. So unless we, you know, can tap into all of those, young people in these villages, there are brilliant people out there, and they just don't have the visibility or opportunity to learn things and have the exposure like, like you student at Bits Pilani do and others, right? And so I think that's going to be extremely important, and I feel that's happening now. With all of these, keep in mind, Aryan, today people somehow assume that, oh, India's startup scene or the ecosystem is really hot and it's in the top of the world and all of that. Yeah, that may be true. But, when Funny had his exit, Redbus, the industry was starving for an exit like that, because the VCs didn't make any money. VCs have to make money in order to, funnel that capital back into startups, right? And till about even 5 years ago, we really didn't have that many, whatever this unicorn thing. I mean, it's one measure, but, and now we talk about 100 unicorns or whatever that is. So these changes take time. It takes a long time, and then suddenly it happens. Then, so I feel the same thing will happen with sort of the beyond metros India in terms of economic opportunities and that kind of a change. Now, whether it is Gen AI or some other technology, I mean, yes, I think right now everyone is trying to figure out how uh, sort of extraordinary this change is. I was talking to an exec at a pretty large, well-known company. He said, "Just don't mention this, but internally they've been running. It's one of the top execs. They've been running some experiments on Gen AI, and he said it's almost 40 to 45% of their code generation can be done by Gen AI now. So if they have 200 engineers, they have to figure out whether they need you know 150 or 100 or 180, whatever, but in that role, right? So I do think Gen AI, I mean, every aspect of life is definitely going to sort of uh, impact AI more broadly, since you also mentioned that, I think. Yeah, but from a socio-economic perspective, and especially as it relates to India, um, I mean, the love for India, the respect for India is so high. I mean, look at the U.S. elections going on right now, and we got a vice president who, on the Democratic side, who's of Indian origin. In the Republican side, two of the, top whatever 5 or 7 candidates are Indian Americans. It's crazy when you think about it, and and so many of the top companies now, are run by Indians. In fact, when Satya Nadella became the CEO, one of the things I told a lot of my, friends that I was talking to is, listen, this is really going to change the opportunity for a lot of Indian Americans, because especially if he succeeds, which, he turned out to be extremely successful in his role. But, what it suddenly did is, for a lot of the boards, when they saw an Indian American in the past, they always thought of him or her as, oh, this can be a great CTO or maybe a great CFO, or but they never thought of that person as a possible CEO. And it's just because they never seen that, right? And this so the first time, that happened at a large company, and then all of a sudden it's like a domino effect. Now you've got, some, I think out of the Fortune 500, there were like 65 or 70, CEOs that are of Indian origin. I mean, including quite a few in the top 20 companies, right? So I think that sort of a change is going to be a big shift, for Indians. So I think that way you guys are in a fantastic place, because you will have, again, a little bit of unfair advantage, right? Being in of Indian origin, when if you decide to go out for whatever, I mean, not physically, but even sitting here, if you're building a global company or anything that you do. And also, I think the BITS Pilani community, you're in a very unique place. The only thing I would say, just, do your part to help the people that have not had because you're in the top 0.1% of India's youth in many ways, right? In terms of your knowledge, access, and all that. So things that you can do for the communities back, especially those of you who come from the districts or the small towns and villages. I think that's going to be very important. And it's a long answer to your question, but you hit upon something that's sort of top of mind for me these days.
Sure. Thank you, sir. That was interesting to hear.
Okay.
Thank you.
Khushi, you may go next.
Hello. So, my question to you is that you have served as a board member of many successful companies, and even currently you are a board member of Rancop Center. So, how has that changed your outlook on the corporate world?
How has that changed my view of the corporate world?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Are you referring to RAND in particular, or?
No,
Any?
not in particular. That is just an example, but just in general.
Oh, okay.
How
Got
has
it.
your
Got it. Yeah.
outlook changed?
Yeah. Hmm. Uh, Again, I'm really not on the boards of any big sort of, corporate public companies for variety of reasons. I've not sort of, pursued that or responded to it when people reach out yet. But with the startups is what I enjoy, and RAN to me is sort of, is a very unique organization. I don't know, some of you may be familiar with. They're one of the most respected sort of policy, research organization, um, and and that because they're the people on the board are typically ambassadors or ministers of different countries, and of course you also have people in the business community. So again, it's kind of related to the question you asked in Kushi. I would say is, I think it's important to always sort of get out of your comfort zone, expand your horizons, which is partly why I sort of got into this rant thing. Uh, and So, has it changed my view of the corporate world much? Fundamentally, I do believe, see, innovation still to a large extent happens outside these corporate. Very few corporates have an ability to continue to innovate and do that, right? So, I mean, the top five most valuable companies in the world uh, certainly didn't exist 50 years ago, but some of them probably didn't even exist 20 years ago, right? So just think about it. And these are all I'm talking about the largest corporations in the world. Um, so I would say, has my perception of corporate changed? No, not much in any meaningful way as I think about your question. But yeah, yeah. So I would say, the real big wealth creators, the big, um, job creators uh, in the world will continue to be, these sort of new companies that get formed. I forget what's the statistic, but in US they said some two-thirds of all employment is created by companies that didn't even exist like 20 years ago or something like that, at any given point. I have to check the exact data point, but something along those lines. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know if that is the question we were asking, but kind of, yeah, I don't have a specific view otherwise on, what corporates do. Yeah. You can tell I do have a bias towards the, startups and all that. Yeah.
Yeah, Vivek, you can go ahead.
Hello, sir. Sir, I wanted to ask when a big corporate buys a startup, how do they how do they uh, like a startup is a totally different culture than a corporate, right? How do they manage each other, and how what helps why do corporates buy startups when they can already do the jobs they do much better?
Yeah, yeah, good question. Yeah. So clearly, this happens so often, especially in the tech world, um, uh, and they won't be doing that if they really think they can do it much better. To first create that, what they can do well is, of course, to help scale these, successful ideas and all of that. What they're really poor at doing is to come up with enough new successful ideas, right? That matter to the world. Um, Startups are much better at doing that, and you know, very few of the acquisitions actually work out successfully. And a lot of there's been enough study on that. When they buy these companies, because again, it comes down to the people and these founders. My own journey. Hitachi bought a company, but we bought four companies before Hitachi bought us, and I always feel like that perspective was very helpful for me, right? Because we were on the other side of the table where we were buying these companies, and so it just and I wanted it to. I had a very conscious sort of objective to make that one of the best acquisitions for Hitachi. I uh, and of course, subsequently, that's what they said. Publicly, and the top exec at Hitachi who was responsible for our acquisition. But I would say, yeah, when they fail, most of the times it's because they're not able to retain the people and keep them motivated. The people that build that thing early on. But sometimes, if it is very technology heavy and if they have gotten that asset, and then, of course, there have been successful ones, then it's easier for them to sort of, scale those, right? Um, and but anytime it's a little bit more people intensive, whatever that acquisition is, I think that's where they kind of are more challenged. And different companies, some companies have much better history of integrating these kind of acquisitions, and sometimes they're just buying for the for your customer base. They don't care who has built it or if those people continue or not, and as long as they can keep some core number of people. By the way, on that account, I must say, when Hitachi bought our company, I told the exec, that was responsible for the acquisition. I said, "Don't worry about sort of the top 5 or 6 people, right? That's me and my whatever immediate staff. Whether we stay or not shouldn't matter to you as much. And frankly, you may not be able to keep us because we obviously are going to be very independent financially and after that acquisition. And while others have also done very well at the next level, I said, but out of these 24, 2,500 employees we had, they're like about next 15 or 20 people beyond the top 5 or 10 folks, right? But if you lose them, then you've got a big problem. So, and here are the 15 or 20 people. And they were actually very appreciative of that, and they took extra efforts to make sure that they are motivated and keep them. So, and I think that's what happens in a lot of these acquisitions. The more attention they can pay to sort of, the people and how to integrate them, I think the more successful they are. Yeah,
Thank you, sir.
sure.
Sanovar, you may go next.
Hello, sir. So I wanted to ask, like, when you invest in a startup, so what kind of a role do you play in the day-to-day operations of the company? And that how does your experience help you in mentoring the founders?
Yeah. The answer to the first question is none. In fact, I should not. That's because I'm investing in you as the founder, and if, and so clearly you'll be more capable, and in your idea, and it's your idea and it's your sort of team, your dream. All I'm doing is hopefully helping you to sort of improving the odds of you achieving your dream, right? So day-to-day operations, none whatsoever. And it's I think the in fact I do a session on just board composition and board management and all of that for a lot of startups. um, and I think the this clearly the PMF that you want to get to and raising capital and all of that. Two of the most challenging situations founders have. The most difficult ones are your uh, the co-founder relationships. I mean, they all start off great, but many of them do have issues along the way, and those can be very hard, right? So the more you can anticipate and deal with those kind of issues, and that has happened with some of the startups that I've been on the board. So I think having that empathy for the entrepreneur, listening to him or her, and just helping them sort of think through those situations, that's absolutely one of the most important. And also, I'm mostly like an independent board member. Although lately I've been investing as a syndicated group, but this is not a fund or anything. We're not a VC, called SVQ Silicon Valley Quad, and we have, of course, invested in a bunch of bits and startups. And they're, so that's one category, the co-founder issues. And the next level of that is, you know, again, the team, the key hires, and the culture. How do you create the right culture to attract and nurture these people? So those sort of issues I'm pretty big on. And, the other conflict can also arise with the board members, which is a very challenging one, sometimes with the VCs on the board. So I help the founders sort of think through and anticipate and all of that. Now, there are a lot, of course, having built companies and having been on so many boards, seen the journey, I hopefully have a reasonable idea of things on the GTM side and technology and all of that. But also, I tell the founders, one of their challenges is to know what advice to discard just because it comes from me as a board member, or because we are not living in that on day-to-day basis. It's you and your team, right? The leadership team that determine the outcome of the company far more than any board member can or will do. So I try not to be too prescriptive about those sort of things in general. That's why. So you know and unless it comes to culture, values, team, those sort of things. Yeah. Hopefully that answers your question. Yeah.
Thank you, sir. It was a great answer.
So we'll take a last question now. Divyansh, you may go ahead.
Okay, so you shed some light on like the one of the most successful entrepreneurs you have met in your journey. So my question to you is that what do you think sets successful entrepreneurs apart from those who struggle to succeed in their ventures?
Yeah, I think I talked about some of the traits. The other one is persistence. You know, and I mean, again, I can give a bits an example. I've talked about this at last BitSync with his permission, but Eltropy, Ashish Garg, I don't know how many of you know, both the co-founders, Ashish and Chandra, were Bitsians. Ashish was also the CEO of Bitsa International at one point. And so, I mean, it took him 5 years to get to 1 million ARR. And that's not easy. And, he raised, I think, just a little under $1 million from BitSpark because I was an early investor in it. And then, also being on his board. And then in 3 years, he went from million to about, 25 million plus ARR, right? So again, it takes time, some of these things, to find the right PMF and everything else. Um, and yeah, so in addition to the traits that I talked about, persistence is very important. Now, this doesn't mean you hang on to your idea even when you don't see any, right signals in the market. You shouldn't fall too much in love with your own idea. It's your ability to sort of modify, adapt those ideas, and Ashish never. Initially, he was building, a sales enablement tool for the semiconductor industry because that's where he worked. And today, it's a digital communications platform for what's called the CFIs, community financial institutions, credit unions, and others in North America primarily, right? But the core of it was what he started with, but a completely different market and a radically different solution altogether, right? So I would say that's very important. Yeah. Uh, and this is where I think good mentorship, I think in general, having a supportive family is extremely important when you go through those sort of, journeys. You guys are all still young, and, you've got some ways to go before you get to that point. And having the co-founders who sort of can stay together and, each sort of fulfill their part of the responsibility, all of that, I think that becomes very important. Yeah, I mean, entrepreneurship is, you only hear about the ones that have succeeded. Very, very few of them sort of get to that point. But when you get it right, the rewards last a lifetime, right? And so it's indeed very rewarding when you can do that. And yeah. And you have, again, coming back to the point I made earlier, you do have you're in a very unique position. You're all in India, living in India, and where in India is, there's probably no country that's better at it than India in terms of the opportunities ahead for young people. And the Bits Pilani community education and the network and everything else that you've got. Yeah. So make the best use of it. Yeah.
That was a great answer. Thanks a lot, sir.
So with this, we come to the end of the talk. I would like to thank sir for taking time out for his session. It was an absolute delight to host you, sir.
Oh, thank you, Asmi. But I should mention one thing. I should have said that right in the beginning. Can I, Asmi?
Yeah, sure,
Okay.
sir.
Yeah. So I actually met Asmi in January, I think.
Yes, sir.
A Bitcoin classmate of mine, Lashpat Lakanpal, and I, we were going to BGM. We flew into Delhi, and so we said, hey, why don't we go to Pilani on the way? And so we rented a car and we're driving. So we stayed in Pilani, for the night. And so that was my second trip to the campus after I graduated, in 81. And so the last time I was there for at least 20 years before. And this was also a little bit more incognito. The last time before that I was there at Apogee, I think, as a keynote speaker and all of that. So it is wonderful. We were at this ANC, and Asmi was there with a friend, and it was kind of a very cold evening, and so they were huddled around this sort of a little whatever a fire pit, and so my friend, being the sort of the boisterous Punjabi, he said, "Hey, we'll join you here, Lajpat." Just a lovable friend, guy, of course. So we kind of just sat there, and then just a little bit into the conversation, I said, I was kind of feeling bad. I said, "Hey, I hope we didn't mean to barge in by like this, but glad." Then Asmi immediately responded, "That was so sweet. I just wanted to say that," and and she said, "No, sir, this place actually belonged to you before it became ours." And that was such a thoughtful comment. I tell you, I was so impressed. And I mean, there are a lot of things about your generation. Hopefully, she's more reflective of what most of you are like. And I think there is something about that. I think that those sort of that mindset, I think is also very important in all the things that we talked about. Whether you want to build a successful career in corporate life or entrepreneurship, whatever. I think that's such a thoughtful answer. I felt back then. So thank you, Asmi. That's how sort of I got to know her, and of course, this session happened because of that. Yeah,
Yes, sir. It's absolutely a delight to talk to you again.
thank you. Yeah,
Yes,
and
sir.
wonderful. Thank you, and enjoyed this, and hopefully, you guys have some takeaways that you'll find useful. Yeah.
Yes, sir. Sure, sir. I would also like to thank the audience for joining us. And before we wrap this up, we would be grateful if the audience could fill out the feedback form for this event. The link has been shared on the chat box, and recording and synopsis for the talk will be shared later on. Bits Embryo strives to organize more of these talks, and we hope we have a similar response going ahead too. Thank you all for your time, and have a good evening ahead.
All right.
Thank
Thank you
you.
all. Take care.
Thank you so
Bye.
much, sir. Bye, sir.